Tonight, more confirmed cases of monkeypox in Canada.
I would say generally that the entire population is susceptible to monkeypox.
What you should know as public health officials look to uncover hidden chains of transmission. A shocked town looking for answers.
It's like the saddest thing I could actually ever dream of. It makes me wonder if I can actually let my kids out and play and stuff anymore.
What happened to a little girl found in Ontario's Grand River? And why toughing it out through back pain might be the better choice.
This is a pretty landmark finding.
We dive into the science that says short-term pain could mean long-term gain. This is The National. Good evening, I'm Hanomansing. The number of monkeypox cases in Canada may be small, but it is both concerning and growing. At least 5 are now confirmed and more are still under investigation. And as cases increase, so do questions. The virus is usually confined to Central and Western Africa, but Europe, Australia, and the U.S. are now all seeing cases. The World Health Organization is meeting about the issue on a daily basis. Public health officials here in Canada are also looking for answers. Lauren Pelly now with their warnings and what experts who have dealt with this virus for years are saying.
I would say generally that the entire population is susceptible to this to monkeypox.
Federal officials say roughly 24 suspected infections are now under investigation.
We need to learn more about it. You know, has it evolved? Has it changed to something different in terms of the mode of transmission and so on?
Officials expect there will be more confirmed cases from Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, where patient samples are being tested.
There's probably been some hidden chains of transmission that could have occurred for quite a number of weeks, given the sort of global situation that we're seeing right now.
Thought to be like a milder form of the smallpox virus, monkeypox doesn't usually spread outside of Africa. More than 500 cases have been reported in Nigeria since 2017, including a handful of deaths. Scientists there warn cross-protection from the smallpox vaccines offered decades ago has long since faded away.
The longer we are away from smallpox vaccine, the more the likelihood that monkeypox will then begin to spread. We've been saying that for quite some time. I think now our fears are being confirmed.
In Africa, outbreaks of monkeypox typically ebb and flow, says this Nigerian virologist.
We don't see rapid transmission like you see with COVID, for example. But also, it dies down almost within a few months after 1 or 2 generations of spread. It kind of dies down. And then suddenly it pops up again.
With an unusual number of cases being reported all at once in countries around the world, the path for this outbreak isn't yet clear. What's reassuring so far, physicians say, is that patients do seem to be recovering.
It really does look like the great majority of people are not having severe or complicated disease.
So, Lauren, I think it is good to emphasize that in Canada, so far at least, there have not been very serious cases, but this can be painful and potentially deadly. So what are officials doing to try to contain infections?
Well, the advice I was told from that virologist in Nigeria is to try and isolate these patients quickly and stop the chains of transmission. That's exactly what they're trying to do in Montreal, which is seeming to be the epicenter of Canada's outbreak, along with Quebec officials looking to deploy smallpox shots. Now, we've also heard a warning from the World Health Organization that with so many summer parties and gatherings expected, we could see transmission of this virus accelerate. Ian?
All right, Lauren, thank you. And another virus is causing concern here tonight. Avian flu has been detected in a commercial poultry farm in BC's Fraser Valley near Vancouver.
We've seen what it can do back in 2004, where we lost the entire industry here in the Fraser Valley.
Previous outbreaks in the region have prompted calls of millions of birds, but poultry groups say now there are tighter controls in place to prevent the spread.
Full disinfecting of all vehicles that come in or out, and change of clothes, showering in and out of the barns, and just making sure we do everything we can to keep our hens healthy.
Commercial farms with more than 100 birds must keep them indoors until June 13th. BC's Fraser Valley is home to 80% of the province's poultry farms, but so far experts say the food supply has not been affected. As health officials search for what is causing cases of severe liver inflammation in children, Canadian public health officials say they've now identified 10 cases. The children are from Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. All needed to be hospitalized, and 2 were given liver transplants. No deaths have been reported. Canada says it's not clear if the number of these acute hepatitis cases with no known cause is increasing. Stunned residents of a Michigan town just south of the Canadian border are taking stock tonight after a tornado ripped through this afternoon, sending people running for their lives. At least 1 person was killed and dozens were injured. Chris Reyes shows us the extensive damage left behind.
That's an actual tornado. Hey, video it.
But we're about to get ran over by it.
Chaos in a northern Michigan town as a dangerous, rare, and deadly tornado touched down Friday afternoon.
Can you hear that thing out my window? Jesus.
It ripped the roofs off buildings and threw debris across roads and parking lots. Trees and power lines were torn down, cutting electricity and blocking roads. It happened in Gaylord, home to about 4,000 people, about 180 kilometers south of the Canadian border. Twisters here are unusual.
We do see tornadoes around the Great Lakes, but it's not typically what we would consider Tornado Alley. You know, we get many more tornadoes in the deep south. The Great Lakes do get them, but they're not as common because the Great Lakes often moderate the temperatures.
There's an upside down Silverado, I told you.
Eyewitness video posted on social media showed the extensive damage caused by the tornado. One person describing the sky turning black moments before it touched down. The city of Gaylord has imposed a curfew that will be lifted tomorrow morning. Emergency crews asked that residents shelter in place overnight. So far, the weather system is not expected to move north to Canada.
So these big supercells that were forming on the west side of the Great Lakes that spawned that tornado, they crossed the Great Lakes, but the cooler waters really fizzled them out.
Severe thunderstorm watches and warnings remain in effect throughout northern Michigan. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
There is frustration from China tonight over Canada's Huawei 5G ban. With the threat of retaliation looming, today Prime Minister Justin Trudeau dug in, saying the ban is in Canadians' best interests.
We need to make sure that we're keeping Canadians safe and secure into the future, and that's exactly what this decision does.
While allies welcome the move, there are questions about why it took Canada longer than others to impose the ban. Also unclear what kind of retaliation from China it could bring. Evan Dyer looks at the potential fallout.
China today vowed retaliation, both in Beijing, where a spokesman accused Canada of violating free trade rules, and in Ottawa, where Beijing's embassy accused Canada of acting in collusion with the U.S. to suppress Chinese enterprises.
They will want to punish us, to show to other countries that if you dare to oppose China, that you will suffer consequences. But at the same time, their room to maneuver in terms of what they could select to punish us has been reduced.
Plagued by lockdowns, China's own economy is in bad shape, and its ability to punish Canadian industries like canola is limited because the world is facing shortages.
They're unlikely to be significantly sanctioned given the food crisis we have been experiencing due to Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine.
A day after his government brought in the ban, citing issues of national security, Justin Trudeau faced questions about why it took so long. Allies have been pushing Canada to make the move for years.
We took the time to carefully analyze the situation, to look at all sorts of factors.
Every other significant major ally of Canada has effectively already made this decision.
We come to the party quite late. And we seem to be doing this on a number of fronts when it comes to defense and security, but also dealing with China.
One sign of that falling behind came last September when the US, UK, and Australia set up a new Pacific Security Alliance. It's like the Five Eyes intelligence sharing partnership, minus Canada and New Zealand, both seen as weak on China.
Seems like the Five Eyes is evolving into some sort of a 3+2, and we are on that +2 component together with New Zealand.
For most of Canada's allies, the debate about 5G ended a while ago, and some may question why the ban will take so much longer to really take effect. Companies don't have to fully remove Huawei equipment for 5 years. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Joe Biden is in South Korea, his first trip to Asia since taking office.
So much of the future of the world is going to be written here in the Indo-Pacific over the next several decades.
Biden's first stop was at this Samsung plant, where he met with the South Korean president. The two will meet again on Saturday, with North Korea expected to top the agenda as it appears poised to resume testing of nuclear weapons while Biden is in the region. But within North Korea, a COVID outbreak is exploding. Just a week after reporting its first death from the disease, Pyongyang now says dozens of people have died and more than 2 million have fallen ill. And in this normally secretive nation, there are clear signs the situation is grim. Sasha Petrusik reports.
On North Korean state TV, the supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, tours pharmacies and lectures officials about what he calls the country's great turmoil. Children put on performances dressed as bottles of hand sanitizer, and workers spritz public spaces. The official panic in this country is real, as suspected cases of COVID jump by hundreds of thousands daily. The World Health Organization fears an uncontrollable spread.
Particularly because the population is unvaccinated, and many have underlying conditions putting them at risk of severe disease and death.
North Korea has rejected all offers of vaccines from abroad, saying it doesn't trust supplies, not even from its ally, China. For 2 years, as the global pandemic surged, isolated North Korea boasted of zero COVID. That recently changed as trade with China increased, and a series of national celebrations in April meant huge unvaccinated crowds spreading the virus. Trouble is, North Korea doesn't have many resources to stop COVID. Not enough masks or hospital beds or even COVID tests. The South Korean president is trying to convince Kim to accept help from abroad.
Until now, North Korea said no to the South Korean helps, but we are working on,
Officially, North Korea's death toll is less than 100. Experts say if it keeps rejecting outside help, though, 500,000 or more could end up dying. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
After weeks of chaotic artillery and trench warfare in Ukraine's east, Russia is reportedly intensifying its assault with dire consequences. This man who lost his wife to shelling in Severodonetsk now gathers his children to escape. According to the UN, hundreds of thousands are reportedly stranded without electricity or running water. And as Briar Stewart shows us, for some, escape is impossible.
In this video, the latest wave of Ukrainian fighters from Mariupol are brought to the site of a former penal colony. Russia says around 2,000 have surrendered from the Azovstal steel plant and it's now been taken. Those claims haven't been confirmed. The wives and mothers of some fighters continue to plead for help from the international community.
My husband is on the way from one hell to another hell.
The fate of those who are now prisoners of war is uncertain, and so is the future of Ukraine's Donbas region. Today, Russian forces ramped up their assault, taking aim at one of the last territories held by Ukraine in Luhansk. Ukraine's national police released this video of people being evacuated from Severodonetsk, an area where they say 12 were killed on Thursday. The Russian military is completely destroying the area, says Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's hell there, and it's not an exaggeration. Ukrainian officials say a Russian missile hit a cultural center Friday just to the west of the Donbas. They say there were 7 victims, including a child. Even in areas like Kharkiv, where Ukraine has managed to push the Russians away from the city, the sounds of artillery are still frequently heard. This man's apartment was hit during shelling. Well, I'm not suffering that much, but others have been killed, he said, and that will never be forgiven. How can we forgive them? Well, the attacks are intensifying in the east. To the south of where I am, Russia already controls a large swath of Ukraine's southern coast. It's difficult to get an accurate picture of life in the occupied territories, but there are reports that Russia is bringing in its own currency and making plans to hold referendums to call for Russia to annex the regions. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Dnipro, Ukraine.
Canada has announced more sanctions on Moscow for its invasion of Ukraine, this time on some luxury goods. An import ban will now cover Russian alcohol and seafood, such as caviar and diamonds. Canada will also no longer export jewelry, luxury clothing, and even kitchenware to Russia. This first long weekend of the late spring, early summer is triggering another rise in gas prices. In many parts of the country, a 4-cent bump at the pumps is expected tomorrow, with more to follow in the days ahead. That might make today's national average for regular gas seem enticing, $1.96 a litre. And one of the highest prices in the country is in Surrey, British Columbia, more than $2.31 a litre. Forensic investigators have been able to narrow down the age of a young girl whose body was found earlier this week in a river in southwestern Ontario. As Ali Chiasson explains, with a community desperate for answers, there's little known about who the child is or how she died.
Shocked, just like everybody in this town. It's a small town, right? So you don't ever have this, really.
Ever since a little girl's body was found here on Tuesday, the people of Dunnville have been desperate for answers.
It's like the saddest thing I could actually ever dream of, because I have 2 kids of my own right now and another one on the way. It makes me wonder if I can actually let my kids out and play and stuff anymore.
3 days after she was discovered, the biggest questions still remain. Was she murdered? When? And how? And who was she?
Right now, we don't have a name for her. We don't know who she is.
The OPP has been searching missing persons databases across Ontario, but no matches yet. Her age is still unknown, but forensic analysis this week has brought police closer to an answer.
That's been narrowed approximately to 10.5 months to 2.5 years.
It's unclear how long the little girl's body was here. The marshy patch of the Grand River where she was found was actually underwater just a few days earlier.
There was some decomposition, which isn't helpful.
While forensic tests continue, Ontario Provincial Police are asking the public for any information. Their tip line is open.
This is an incident that affects the whole community. You know, we look after our children, and they're vulnerable, and yeah, we just want to bring this to an end and find out this little girl's identity and determine the circumstances.
Everybody's talking about it. It's a small town. It's obviously jarring when something like that happens, especially in a town like this. And me having children, your head goes there, and it's not pleasant.
As the police investigation continues, the community is planning a candlelit vigil for the little girl next week, whether they know who she is by then or not. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Dunnville, Ontario.
A man who used a sword to kill 2 people in Quebec City on Halloween night in 2020 has been found guilty by a jury of first-degree murder.
We're really happy for the victims' families. It's been a tough and long process for them, so we hope that the verdict today will give them the chance to turn the page and go on with their lives.
26-year-old Carl Girard has also been convicted of 5 counts of attempted murder for attacking other people that night. His sentencing hearing is set for June 10th. New research suggests next time you have minor back pain, you may want to think twice before taking an anti-inflammatory.
It certainly gives me reason to pause.
Why that short-term relief could actually lead to long-term pain. The BC teenager making hockey history.
My mom was driving me home from school, and I just saw on my phone, and I was just shocked.
And the surprise phone call she got from a Canadian superstar. Plus, stories from the long lines and wait times at Canada's biggest airport.
I was met with the hurdle of just thousands and thousands of people.
Are travelers in for a turbulent summer? We're back in 2.
CBC News, The National, named Canada's best national newscast at the Canadian Screen Awards.
I'm Tamara Kandaker on Nothing is Foreign, CBC's World News podcast, a contentious court decision in Israel and the possible expulsion of more than 1,000 Palestinians. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
New research is raising some big questions about how back pain is typically treated after an injury. The study out of McGill University found that reaching for a common medication, anti-inflammatories, could actually prolong the suffering. Christine Burak explains the findings.
And so what is here?
These are blood samples from people with lower back pain, part of Dr. Luda Diachenko's study at McGill University, looking into why some people's pain heals faster than others. The results were stunning.
Well, the first reaction was it must be a mistake.
Her findings challenge conventional medical advice that says if you're in pain, take a pill that reduces inflammation, like Advil or aspirin.
There is a new discovery in our hands, and it's a little bit different from what we all believed.
Diachenko studied nearly 100 people with acute lower back pain. Blood samples were taken when they first reported pain and 3 months later. Results showed those who healed quickly had clear markers of rapid, intense inflammation led by white blood cells. But samples from those still in pain did not show any signs of that inflammatory response.
We don't like inflammation because it hurts.
Are we looking at pain for both?
Diachenko asked Jeffrey Mogill to do a similar study with mice using medications that block inflammation. Results showed mice that received the anti-inflammatory drugs had less pain at first, but were more likely to have pain 3 to 6 months later.
Yes, stopping it is a good idea right now, but at the cost of increasing your chances to develop chronic pain, which is going to be a much bigger problem.
McGill researchers also analyzed data from back pain patients and found similar results. They're now organizing human trials to confirm their work. But already, doctors around the world are intrigued.
So this is a pretty landmark finding.
The question doctors often get from patients in pain is, what should I take? Anti-inflammatory drugs are widely considered safe, but
It certainly gives me reason to pause and say, okay, how soon do I reach for an anti-inflammatory? Because the clinical practice is to reach for it very early.
It's kind of like a stabbing pain.
Steve Katz is treating his back pain with exercise, physiotherapy, and painkillers. He knows meds aren't a cure-all.
At the same time, I'm allergic to pain.
There are pain meds that don't block inflammation, including Tylenol.
You already worked out today?
But experts say non-medical interventions can be a better place to start.
That first 24 to 48, I would say, if you can get through it, try and see if you can. Face me.
Short-term pain that may offer long-term relief. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
A BC teen has made it into the history books. Chloe Primerano is the first female skater drafted by a Canadian major junior team. She told CBC News' Leanne Young how that feels and her ultimate hockey goal.
Chloe Primerano isn't afraid of hard work.
I usually shoot like about 200 pucks, and then I do some stick handling like 20-30 minutes.
And the 15-year-old's hard work is paying off. She's made hockey history.
I got drafted to the WHL.
The Vancouver Giants picked her in the 13th round, making her the first female skater ever drafted into the Canadian Hockey League.
My mom was driving me home from school, and I just saw on my phone, and I was just shocked, and I was like amazed.
She and her family had heard rumors she might be drafted.
It's hard to believe that someone's going to pull the trigger on something like that. Even though, in our opinion, she deserved it. And obviously, we believe that if she was a boy, that she would have been picked long before then.
Primerano started hockey at the age of 3. She grew to love the competitive nature of the game. Those who have coached her say she was destined for it.
She's one of those that wants to be, the first one on the ice and the last one off. But that being said, she makes everybody around her better.
Only female goalies have preceded Primerano in the CHL.
You received the news from the Giants. You have been drafted by the Western Hockey League.
She's now generating buzz across the hockey world.
For her to be able to get drafted is huge for women's hockey, and I'm super pumped for her and to see what kind of things that she does in the future.
As a 13th round draft pick, Primerano says she knows it's unlikely she'll end up playing for the Giants, but teammates have been welcoming. So has the team's part owner, singer Michael Bublé.
He just called me to congratulate me, and it's really, really crazy.
This historic moment isn't lost on the teen.
It means everything, like just to be an inspiration to young girls as well, like show them that they can do anything if they work hard for it. That was gold.
Her ultimate goal, an Olympic gold medal for Team Canada. Leanne Young, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Next, a look at major issues at Canada's biggest airport.
I was met with the hurdle of just thousands and thousands of people.
Is this what summer travel is going to look like? And later.
Make love to me now on the floor. Oh, hey!
With the return of Kids in the Hall, we look at what the future of Canadian sketch comedy could look like. There were long lines and chaotic crowds at times at Toronto's Pearson Airport today as we head into the holiday weekend. Seems like this had become the norm recently, with travel surging and airports dealing with staffing shortages. There are growing calls for the Canadian government to do something to address what's increasingly becoming a nightmarish experience for many travelers. Tonight, 3 Canadians shared their recent travel experiences and the feelings of anxiety and frustration that they felt.
We were actually on our honeymoon. We had left and went to Mexico. When we arrived, everything seemed pretty normal. And there was a little announcement on the overhead speakers that said we might be stuck on the tarmac for just a short while. It was a new policy that they put in place because of COVID. So everyone was pretty understanding. So time continued to go by. After an hour passed, I began to have a panic attack. I do have quite bad anxiety. So I did approach one of the flight attendants. I had to try to explain that I was having a panic attack and, this would turn into a medical emergency eventually. And I asked, do you want to wait until I pass out, or is there something that can be done? As a person who struggles with anxiety, it was a very difficult thing to experience. It really ruined the ending of our trip.
Despite efforts of getting to the airport at about 5:15 and my flight beginning boarding at 7:20, I was met with the hurdle of just thousands and thousands of people and all of us facing the same challenge of absolute congestion and absolute backup through customs and security. So we were instructed to go to this far side of the airport where it just felt like herded cattle. We were just in this densely populated, large area. I mean, if you're talking COVID, that's an area where definitely you'd be getting COVID for sure. Just the hours and hours of agony of standing in these lines and running left and right. I will never travel through Pearson International again. That's my word and that's my commitment.
Once we landed in Toronto, I had already 16 and a half hours behind me of traveling. And of course, I just wanted to get out of the plane, take a shower and relax. And then the pilot said, we can't get out of the plane because there are too many people at the customs. And by the third announcement, it was already 40 minutes after we had landed. So then we came down the escalator and the lineups were terribly long. And then they said, we have to line up to go to a kiosk. Well, I got to the kiosk and it just wouldn't take me. I tried again and again. Somebody working there could have easily helped us along, but there was no one.
Well, let's get behind the headlines and take a closer look at what's been happening at airports and on planes. We have Andy Gibbons, Vice President of Government Relations for WestJet, and Fleming Frisdahl, who is a travel agent. And Fleming, let me start with you. You've also been doing a lot of traveling in recent weeks. So for you and your clients, what's it been like arriving at the airport?
Well, it's been a nightmare from getting onto the aircraft. When we're standing, I was just flying out to Toronto the other day, and the lineup was from one security entry point to the other security entry point. So it was half the airport long.
And Fleming, do you have a sense of what's slowing things down? We have heard from the federal government. Some of it, they say, is travelers who kind of forget to take their liquids, for example, out of their bags. But what's your sense from what you've seen?
I find that hard to believe. I believe it's that the airports are not equipped. And we know they can be because there used to be more people traveling and you didn't have these lineups. It's 100% the airport and the staff and the screening staff and not having enough staff. It's a very simple equation of how to fix this problem.
So getting through security onto the plane has been getting a lot of attention. Andy, there's another issue too, and that is the big backup for international passengers arriving in Canada. Tell us about that.
It's been a major emerging problem. Some nights in Toronto, Ian, we'll have half a dozen flights with a tarmac delay of over 120 minutes. And what this means for your guests is you can be waiting on the aircraft 2 hours before you get off the plane and then into the customs hall, which is another wait. So we've really impressed upon the federal government and the agencies in question. That type of thing has to end right now. We can't be keeping Canadian families, international visitors, and international business people on a tarmac and in our aircraft for those types of periods. It just can't go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime I've flown internationally, I'm counting down the minutes to landing and then to getting off the plane. So to be stuck on there for, for an hour and a half or whatever would be tough. What's the problem? Andy, what's causing that delay?
There's a variety of problems. If you listen to the Toronto Pearson Airport Authority, they will say, Ian, that the first thing the government can do is to remove the public health agency requirements, either remove the requirements or take the testing and those measures out of the airport facility. So I think we need to simplify the process. We need to review all of the COVID measures that have been put in place. And I think there's staffing issues as well at the CBSA. But if we are holding people on an aircraft because they have to socially distance themselves inside a terminal, I think to anyone that makes no sense at all. So I think these issues are coming into focus and we're looking for the government to respond pretty quickly here.
Fleming, you must be getting some frantic calls from some of your clients about missed, connections or bookings somewhere else. Well, what's been happening with them?
Well, the customers are very concerned because they may miss their cruise, they may miss their connection, they'll miss their first night in their hotel, and it's not the airline's fault. And the problem is the airlines are struggling already in having enough crew, and when the crew start going over in time and all that, now suddenly the flight can't take off to go back to the home destination. It's just a domino effect, and the government has had many more people going through the airport than what go through it now. So it is not an issue with them not being able to do it. It's just don't put the staffing behind it.
So, Andy, a lot of people have been delaying flying for a long time because of COVID. And so, we hear about this pent up demand. And now there are all these problems. What advice do you have for passengers?
I think first and foremost, we have to recognize the good news here. Canadians are traveling, restrictions have come down, families are reuniting, people are taking their dream trips again and visiting this country as importantly as anything else. So that, we shouldn't lose sight of the good things that are happening here in our country. I think advice for our guests primarily is to be kind, whether it's a WestJet flight attendant who's been through so much during COVID and is asking you to stay on the plane for a bit longer, or it's someone who's working at one of our government agencies. We just really need to buckle down and get through this and really be kind to each other, because these situations can get out of hand, but everyone wants the same thing, which is an efficient transportation system and a proper welcome mat for Canada when they land here.
And Fleming, from a travel agent's perspective, advice for passengers or people thinking about being passengers?
You know what, the only magic is go to the airport early. Be prepared to know that you're going to be standing around for a while. And then some days you find there's no lineup. You get through right away. So the magic is be early.
CATSA posts wait times. The only thing is you don't know when you look at that wait time what it's going to be like in an hour or two. Andy, any advice in terms of how early you should get to the airport?
We've posted those advisories on our website, and CATSA does as well. So I think the standard now is 2 hours for a domestic flight at most airports. So, I'd ask your listeners and your watchers to follow that guidance and just be prudent. Bring a book, enjoy your family, and make the best of it and enjoy that trip, and don't let these things get in the way of what you're there at the airport to do, which is to go and experience something new and great, or visit a friend and relative who you miss.
Well, we've been patient through a lot over the last 2.5 years, and I guess patience will still get us through this. Thanks to both of you for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you, Ian.
Some of Canada's biggest suburbs are facing a big decision that could have major implications. Should they expand outside their borders or pack more people into existing cities? We'll look at the challenges of urban sprawl next. And later, the big changes reportedly coming to Saturday Night Live. To sprawl or not to sprawl, that's the question facing city developers across this country. Suburbs mean larger homes, larger yards, but they're largely car dependent, and some are worried about what that does to climate change. And as Hanomansing explains, some say there is another way.
This is what you could say is the heart of Streetsville. And it's not like what you see in most of the suburbs.
Rahul Mehta lives in Mississauga, Ontario, part of the larger region of Peel, known for sprawling neighborhoods of single-family homes crisscrossed by some of the busiest highways in North America. The historic neighborhood of Streetsville in Mississauga, however, stands out.
So Streetsville has done a lot right in creating a mix of housing, a mix of retail, and a place where people actually want to be outside without needing a car.
Surrounded by sprawling suburbs, it has maintained its walkable, livable character, even as zoning rules make building this type of low-rise density difficult in other parts of the city.
You've got the library, patios, shops, but here I actually can get to them by walking or biking, and I think a lot of people enjoy this scale, this comfort, and we just want to see more of it in the city. I wish it was everywhere.
1.5 million people live in Peel, with 700,000 more expected in the next 3 decades.
Anybody in opposition, that carries.
Peel's Regional Council recently adopted an official plan that would expand development into farmland and green spaces along its northern edges to accommodate some of those new residents.
The number of people for whom the dream still is, I get to go into my smallish backyard and enjoy a barbecue with my family. A lot of people still want the single detached home. We've got to try and move away from it to a degree, but it's still a demand in the marketplace.
The Ontario government ordered municipalities like Peel to present plans for accommodating new residents all the way to 2051. All this during a provincial election campaign where the incumbent Progressive Conservative Party is running on a platform that includes building a highly contentious highway through the suburbs of Toronto, including Peel.
We are going to build the 413, the Bradford bypass, and many other highways.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ford.
But there are consequences from paving over green spaces for development. Some of the best farmland in the country could be lost. And conservation areas like this one, in the central part of Peel, will be threatened along with the crucial ecosystem services they provide, habitats for endangered species, and permeable land that can absorb water and prevent floods.
By keeping development within our existing settlement area boundaries, keeping the headwaters of our streams off limit for development, we're protecting ourselves from flooding down the road. So we're in the
The need for conserving green spaces has only become more evident with the worsening climate crisis.
It's not for nothing that Ontario's post-war car-dependent suburbs have been called Ontario's tar sands. Peel is squandering its last best opportunity to fix those neighborhoods. And the problem with that is that locks in car dependency, and that is utterly incompatible with meeting our climate obligations.
Urban researchers argue there's still room to grow within existing boundaries in the Toronto area. After all, Mississauga only has a density of 2,400 people per square kilometer. By comparison, the city of Toronto has 4,400 people per square kilometer, while cities abroad that Canadians love to visit have densities many times that.
So this strip is really great for local businesses.
Here in Kensington Market, a busy neighborhood in downtown Toronto, there's a taste of that density.
This weaving of people, bikes, and cars. You know, there's lots of different local businesses that are quite unique to the market and unique to the city. There's such a variety of different types of homes, like a lot of it is low rise. Everything kind of spills onto the street in Kensington, which is something that we don't see a lot in North America, but we see a lot of it in Europe and European cities, and that's why we love those European cities, right? That's what draws us to them. And so Kensington kind of gives you a little taste of what that is.
Ontario's election is on June 2nd, with the province having final say over urban plans. The outcome of this election will have a lasting impact on Ontario's environmental commitments and the kinds of neighborhoods millions of people live in. Hanomansing, CBC News, Toronto.
It's a pretty good time to be a fan of sketch comedy, with plenty of new shows and even some old ones making big comebacks.
Make love to me now on the floor. Oh, hey, oh.
Coming up, why sketch comedy is having its moment again and where it might be looking for laughs in the future. SNL cast veteran Pete Davidson will be leaving the show after its season 47 finale tomorrow. That's according to U.S. entertainment media. He's not the only one. Reports say Kate McKinnon, Aidy Bryant, and Kyle Mooney are also not coming back next year. The triumphant return of Canada's Kids in the Hall and the success of a new generation following in their footsteps is all evidence that sketch comedy is not only thriving, it's in the midst of a full-on revival. And as Eli Glasner shows us, with social media becoming the new spotlight, the business of making people laugh is changing.
Make love to me now on the floor. Oh, hey! Oh.
The Kids in the Hall are back and wilder than ever.
Begin!
But a new documentary shows the struggle when they started.
There's nothing in show business more exhausting than sketch comedy.
We would do television, we would do tours, we would just never stop.
What kept them going? The connection.
It's like family.
Yeah,
family you like.
There's no place on earth where I feel I have the same chemistry that I have with these guys.
Yeah.
They're all super different.
A big fan of the kids, this Baroness von Sketch member is part of a new wave of shows enjoying a sketch comedy renaissance.
I think that we were lucky to take advantage of the trend. You know, like Amy Poehler and Tina Fey had been doing really, really well. Broad City had been doing really, really well. So who knows? You know, I think that they were like, let's get on this.
Hold that door! Hold that door!
With the success of shows like I Think You Should Leave and strong ratings for Saturday Night Live, sketch seems bigger than ever.
I am suggesting we are watching the Born Ultimatum.
But a new generation is taking the laughs straight to fans.
What are the chances?
With over 8 million views on TikTok, this Toronto performer says there's a relevancy to the platform big shows can't match.
You're able to make a video about something that happened this morning on the news, and people will be like, oh yeah, I saw that, I know, I relate, that's funny, I'll send it to my friends, conversation, community.
While social media is where most of us see sketch, it doesn't pay the bills.
That is the big question, Eli. There's the fact that you have to get views to stay on a network, but also part of the decision of keeping people on is like, you know, do you have social cachet?
As creators struggle to monetize, sketch is here to stay.
People always want to laugh, for sure. There's always a discussion, is sketch gone? It's back. Right. I've seen that many times.
And while the kids welcome the company, there are limits.
The important thing is that we don't want any of the new people to be that good. Oh God, not yet.
Eli Glassner, CBC News, Toronto.
We wish them well. Not that well.
Yeah.
Not that well.
Wish them wellishness.
Wellish, yeah.
Next, a group of female pilots pay homage to Amelia Earhart on a special anniversary.
Amelia was such an inspiration to female pilots over the years.
Her impact 90 years after her historic solo flight is our moment. 90 years ago today, trailblazing pilot Amelia Earhart departed Harbour Grace, Newfoundland. 15 hours later, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She has been inspiring female pilots ever since, like the organization The 99s. They were in Harbour Grace today to celebrate the anniversary, and that is our moment.
I wanted to come out here today because Amelia was such an inspiration to female pilots over the years. Certainly no one back in the day would have encouraged me to pick this as a career. I ended up doing a survey of small aircraft around Vancouver for Transport Canada, went on my first flight in a small airplane and was hooked immediately. They hired me in 1978. I was very lucky, and there's many other wonderful women that have followed after me, and the reason it's important for me to be here today is because I think we need to encourage other women to get into this field. And one of the things that's needed is role models, and Amelia certainly was one. She was a trailblazer. She was a brave woman who undertook something that very few people, male or female, would have done back in the day. And she's one of the most notable women that I looked up to in aviation.
Hey, Judy, the woman who was speaking there, pretty notable in aviation as well. The only female in her program back in 1975 at Selkirk College. She became a commercial pilot for Air Canada, captained 767s and 777s, retired after, I think, 23,000 hours of service. I hope Amelia Earhart had some inkling the legacy that she would have as she did that cross-Atlantic solo flight. That is the National for May 20th. Join me Sunday for Cross Country Checkup on CBC Radio and CBC News Network, and later that night right here for the National. Good night.